from Mr. Ravi Venkatesan, former chairman of Microsoft India, and with over to you.
Thanks very much. Hi, Ravi, and thank you very much for joining us here. You know, AI often perhaps the biggest opportunity for our generation, maybe the biggest disruptor, and where that goes is really up to us. So let me welcome you again, Ravi, for joining us here to help decode, putting AI to work for people, and people is where I want to start.
Great.
Because some of the questions in the room here also were these concerns about job losses. But in the thoughts that you've shared with us previously, what I found most striking is how you differentiate how AI will impact developed countries versus what it'll do to India. The worry here is not really about unemployment. It's about the destructions of dreams and aspirations. So if you could unpack for us what you meant by that and what this technology really means here for an engineer that's starting out in a college today and how he should look at it.
Super. I think Aditya got us started off very well with his question. Look, there's absolutely no doubt that AI is going to have a very, very major impact on knowledge work and knowledge work employment in the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And anybody who's wishing it'll be otherwise is, I think, somewhat delusional. Now, clearly it's going to impact some groups, some sectors, much more than others. So most of us in this room today, I think, come from IT services, financial services, and those are the sectors which are going to be most exposed to AI. Young people, I think, are going to have a disproportionately hard time. So that's new graduates, early career stages, because those are the roles that are most vulnerable to automation. If you have narrow skills, you're probably going to have a harder time than if you're a generalist who can move across jobs and roles. So overall, this promises to be... Oh, you want my mic up?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. But let's calibrate how big this is for India. So in India, we have a very different problem from the US. The US, as you alluded to, is much more about protecting high-wage jobs. In India, we have about 600 million people who are in employment broadly, but about 85–90% of them, Ritu, are in informal roles, like agriculture, farming, construction work, your chaiwala, so on and so forth. And they're not likely to be impacted much by AI in the short term. But there are about 75 million or 80 million people who are in the formal sector, and about half of them are in knowledge work. And out of that, about 10 million jobs or 15 million jobs are highly exposed roles. And I think these are the ones that are most vulnerable. Now, could it be 10% of them that are impacted in the next 2–3 years? It could be 15–20%. We don't know. But the main point I want to get across is that yes, we have an unemployment challenge, but relative to the size of our economy and population, it's not that big. The problem is these jobs are aspirational. It's how this ladder was the mobility ladder out of poverty for many of us, including me. I came from a lower middle income family all the way to affluence by steadily climbing this ladder. And if you cut that ladder, break it, it's the end of aspiration. So that's the issue. Now, how big are the job losses going to be? That was the question. And the answer bluntly is, we don't know. Why? 2 reasons. One is, it depends on us. I think people think, I wrote an article a few months ago, 2 months ago, which got a lot of tongues wagging. It says, AI doesn't destroy jobs, CEOs do. And that's the blunt truth. So I am on the board of a company in Japan called Hitachi. And in Hitachi, the CEO and the board made a public statement that nobody is going to lose their job to AI. We're going to reskill them and help people adapt and so forth. Last week, in the midst of all the stuff going on at HDFC Bank, I spoke to Shashi, the CEO, and he said the same thing. In HDFC Bank, they've made a declaration that people will not lose their jobs because of their AI adoption. They're going to reskill people, help them move to new roles, etc. On the other hand, Ritu, 2 days ago, Meta, which I believe is one of your important tenants, made 2 announcements. And this is really interesting. One announcement said, look, there's going to be more losses because of AI. And then a few hours later, they made an announcement about their new executive compensation scheme, which says the top 5 people are going to get up to $900 million each over the next 5 years if they hit some targets. So this is kind of really concerning. And so the question is, do we have more companies in India and Bengaluru who are like HDFC, or are we going to have more companies of the other sort? That's going to determine the scale of job losses, because as the minister said, AI is an adaptive challenge. It's happening so fast that people and institutions don't have time to adapt.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if there's responsible behavior and leadership from many of us in this room and outside this room, things could be much better.
Well, you made a strong statement there. It's not AI that's going to cause job losses. It is CEOs. So to the CEOs in the room and outside that you'd perhaps want to advise on how best to make use of this AI technology as to not cause job losses, as to skill the workforce, and to get the best out of it. What would be your top 2 or 3 advice?
Look, first of all, I think I was CEO at a time when things were much easier. Today's CEO job is much, much, much harder, and hats off to all of you who are leading either big companies or parts of big companies. Look, I think the main point I would say is AI adoption is not a technological issue primarily. It's a change management and leadership issue. And the companies that are going to succeed, the companies that are going to prosper, are those that approach it through this lens of change management. So, of course, every CEO has to figure out how to drive productivity up, change the business model, and drive innovation with AI. Yes. But the more fundamental challenge is, how do I retool my organization for AI? How do I transform it? So, and that has deep implications. For instance, who do you hire? It no longer makes sense to hire people for pedigree and credentials. What matters much more is, does the person have entrepreneurial mindset and skills? Do they have a growth mindset? Can they learn new things? That matters much more. You're more than likely in a legacy organization to have a lot of people who don't have the mindset and skills for the future. What do you do about it? Then the answer is, let's reskill and upskill it. That's very easy to say. It's really hard to do, because it's not just about teaching them how to use AI tools. That's okay. How do you change their mindset to be much more adaptive, curious, entrepreneurial, risk-taking? And you can't teach this, Ritu, in the classroom. It has to be taught experientially. One of the problems is with automating the entry-level roles is you hire a few of them, and they have to grow up overnight into managing teams and so forth. So you can't take 5 years to give a new hire responsibility and so forth. You have to make some big bets and put, and so on and so forth. So I would say that you have to overemphasize all these aspects, and the currency for change is trust. And the problem today is employees less and less trust management to do the right thing for them. So if you're a CEO today, the most important thing you can do is be honest, transparent in your communications, and be willing to share some of that productivity benefit you're getting from deploying AI with the workforce. Okay. So, and if you don't do that, people are going to passively or actively resist, and the really good ones who have options are going to leave.
Well, the other point that I wanted to address, and this is something we brought up with Minister Kharge as well, is how to make AI inclusive. Interestingly, again, in your article, I think you drew this parallel between how the PC revolution, when we got personal computers, created this elite, whereas the mobile revolution, it helped uplift the masses.
Yes.
So, what do we do to ensure that AI goes the mobile way, not the PC way? And are there any early signs to say we are going the PC way?
So one of the things I'll start out by saying is, look, I'm not a techno-optimist, but in India we need to see AI far more as an opportunity than a threat. If you're a rich country already, if you're Germany, if you're UK or the US or whatever, I think you have a lot more at risk, because you've already got 100% of your workforce in formal jobs. Many of them are high paying, and you're trying to protect that standard of living. Also, you're trying to protect your hegemony, which another rising power like China, wants you to displace you. For India, we don't have these challenges nearly as much as the productivity challenge. Our challenge is we're still a low middle income country, And vast parts of our economy are extremely low productivity and low wage. Think agriculture, think all these, we have 65 million small businesses. Most of them are really low wage, low productivity, no growth. And AI could be the biggest tailwind or tide that lifts all boats. But for this to happen, as you said, referring to something I may have written, we have to have broad diffusion. And what does broad diffusion mean? Somebody asked the question from the back. It is about getting farmers to use AI to help them make better decisions. When to plant what crop, how to deal with pests, how do I get the best price realization, how can I add more value so that I do food processing and so on, how do you get small businesses using AI, etc. And that is the key to our success. But that's not easy, because what it means is, you have to make AI infrastructure pretty much part of India's stack. Just like UPI is out there for us to use, we need to be able to use AI. Second, we have to localize district-level data and train our models on that. And third, we have to get all these people, 1.4 billion of us, not only using AI tools, but with the entrepreneurial mindset. Now, the good news, Ritu, is if any country has done it before, it's us.
Yeah.
So this is the PC versus the AI. Most of us here, I think, were part of the PC internet revolution from 95 to 2010. I certainly was. Yeah. And that was a huge success. That's why Jeetu is where he is and I am where I am, because we built essentially a $300 billion sector exporting IT services on the back of the PC revolution. But even at its peak, 2010, 2011, we had only 50 million PCs out there. Okay? So it was a narrow diffusion technology. The life of an average Indian didn't change. Now, if you look at 2011 to 26, we have what? We have more than 1 billion people accessing the internet using smartphones. And today, 500 million people would have transacted on UPI. This is broad diffusion, and it determines who gets to participate in the economy, and the answer today is everyone. So the statistic is just astounding. The percentage of online GDP to total GDP in 2010 was 10%. Today it's about 25%, and the online part is growing twice as fast. So we need to repeat this success with AI. And we need to do it before the demographic window closes. Britain became prosperous and a world power because it seized the disruption called the steam engine. And I think if we are able to seize this disruption called AI to lift up all parts of our economy through broad diffusion, that's when you get Viksit Bharat. There's no Viksit Bharat without AI.
Well, all that is well and good, but let me just end with this final question, since you brought up, for India to act before the window closes. Again, going by some of the thoughts you've articulated before, and if history is any example, the Industrial Revolution, for instance, it made the lowest rung workers a lot worse off for the first few decades before it made anyone's lives any better. For us, when it comes to the AI revolution, India can't afford to lose decades. What are the 2 or 3 things you'd want the country, the CEOs, the corporates to really focus on to make the most of this opportunity?
Well, the answer is different based on who is the audience. So for CEOs, I'd say, look, of course you've got to figure out how to deploy AI at scale within your enterprise. But do that in a way that takes the workforce along. Don't just spit them out on the street with an announcement, right? So that's what the CEO advice will be. I think for the country, what we have to do is figure out how to get everybody using AI really quickly and get everybody thinking about new use cases, new businesses they can build. Because there will be some job loss in the next 5-10 years. But if we can get many, many more new businesses starting up that create new opportunities, new jobs, etc., we can come out of this. What is really interesting is everything that is happening has happened before in history. And I think one of the most important things we can do is become students of history again. So you look at Britain, how did it become prosperous? It was actually a rather poor third-rate European power in the 1600s. But by 1750, 1800, it had risen to dominance. And the reason was it got many ordinary people, often those without schooling or pedigree, tinkering, inventing new things. So if you look at all the seminal inventions of the Industrial Revolution, like the steam engine, the locomotive, the automated spinning wheel, all these things were invented not by Oxford, Cambridge elite, but by ordinary people with no education. So if we can put this technology to work and have every ordinary person using it and imagining the future, I think we will power our way out of this.